In this video, we're going to talk about the concept of reverse engineering in the context of software technology. The first thing to note is that, recall with software, there's multiple ways that someone can be protecting the rights in their source code or their software embodied invention. Those include patent rights, trade secret rights, copyrights, or contract law. If you're trying to reverse engineer someone's software embodied invention, in other words, deconstruct someone's product or service to either understand how to create something that's operable with it, or to understand the functionality of that product so you can compete with them in the marketplace, you need to be aware of how they are trying to protect their product or service. If it's through patent rights, then you're going to need to design around their patent claims or have some theory as to why their patent is invalid or unenforceable. We've talked about these concepts in a prior video, but generally speaking, you're going to need to look at their patent claims and then design your product such that it doesn't meet each and every element of one of their patent claims. If they have trade secret rights in their source code or some aspect of their business around their product or service, you're going to need to make sure that you haven't improperly obtained any of their trade secrets such that you're misappropriating some of their trade secret rights. And we've talked about this in another video. If they protect their source code or some aspect of their software embodied invention through contract law, then you need to make sure you're aware of the terms to which you've agreed and you're not breaching those terms. For example, if you access someone's software or source code through a click-wrap agreement, and that click-wrap agreement where you've clicked "I agree" to contract terms on the web or provide otherwise to you, and those are enforceable, then you're bound by those terms. And you can contractually agree not to do something, even if you're otherwise permitted by the law to do something. So in other words, fair use of copyright law may allow you to make certain uses of someone's copyrighted source code, but if you've agreed in contract, in other words, through accessing that source code, you've made an agreement to that other party that you're not going to reverse engineer or make certain uses of that source code, then even though you'd otherwise have the rights to do so through fair use, contract law would say you can't do that without breaching the contract. Let's talk about what we're going to focus on here, copyright law. As we've learned, copyright law automatically protects most source code once it's been reduced to writing, once you've created the source code. Also recall that copyright law only protects the particular expression in source code, not the underlying idea. So in theory, you should be able to study someone's product, see the high-level functionality or the idea it's seeking to incorporate, and then independently create the expression in source code to accomplish that functionality or idea and not be infringing their copyright. To avoid any dispute, people will often set up what's called a clean room. In other words, they will have programmers that have never seen the underlying source code behind a competitor's product. The people that will look at the product will then explain at a very high level the functionality or the idea behind that product, convey that idea that they want to support through software development to the developers, and have those developers independently create the code to accomplish that idea or functionality. And if done that way, they should avoid any problems, because those people that have actually created the expression in the source code have never seen the copyright expression in the competitor's code. The purpose for which you're seeking to reverse engineer a competitive product may matter. Courts are generally more lenient if you're seeking to create interoperable product, as compared to if you're seeking to replicate the functionality of a competitor's product so you can compete with them in the marketplace. Because sometimes the clean room system doesn't work perfectly. Maybe you may need to make an intermediate copy of someone's source code in order to decompile it or study it. And that intermediate copy will typically be a fair use. Courts are more likely to find that to be a fair use if you're seeking to reverse engineer the competitor's product in order to create an interoperable product, not to replicate the functionality to compete with them in the marketplace. One issue that often comes up is, how different does your code need to be from someone else's code in order to avoid replicating the expression of that code? Some courts will employ something called the abstraction, filtration, comparison test. The first step of that test is to separate the code that has been created through reverse engineering into different levels of abstraction, from very high levels that are incorporating general functionality to lower levels of abstraction that have specific instructions or code. You then filter out the non-protectable elements of the code, such as elements that are part of the public domain, elements that are generally known in the field to accomplish certain general functionality, or elements of code that are dictated by external factors. Then you come to the third part of the test, which is comparison. You'll compare what's left. After you've abstracted and you've filtered, what's left should be the expression, and you compare that level of expression to the expression in the original code and see if they're substantially similar. Some courts will use this test, other courts will use other tests, but in general, you need to make sure that your code is different enough from the original code so that you avoid any accusations that you've infringed the expression in the original code and therefore infringed their copyrights. And this is a general overview of issues related to reverse engineering in the context of software.